In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Genius Brain Podcast, Quarantine Edition. And you know, I gotta say this, I have done Genius Brain so many different times, but I've never done it on a Zoom podcast before. And I was thinking to myself, everybody wanted me to talk about the whole COVID situation. And I was like, I don't know why you want me to talk about COVID. I don't know shit. And I was like, I don't know any doctors. I don't know a single.
You better not have said you don't know any doctors. I swear to God.
I said, I don't know any doctors. This is as I'm talking to Gabo. I'm like, man, do you know any doctors that you could recommend me to?
I will leave a knife in your bladder, my friend, and then I will save your bladder. That is my duty.
And I'll stitch it right back up. Look at you son of a bitch. Now you back on the. Everybody's been asking you to come back to the podcast, and the thing that they remember about you the most is when you left me in a Sikh temple, the bow. that's your calling card.
Listen, that was the communication wasn't great. We didn't call a good audible, and we ended up not in a great situation.
No, the audible was that we weren't going to do it. That was the good audible, and then you backed out last minute.
We should leave some things in the past. Let's move forward. We're in a quarantine. We got bigger things to worry about, David. There's a pandemic going on. It's a pandemic.
You shut the fuck up. So, I mean, the reason why, okay, first of all, I feel like a lot of people who. There's one thing that got me that Denzel Washington said, right? So Denzel Washington, he was watching this, I was watching an interview of him, and they wanted him to give a statement about media, right? And I don't really consider myself quote unquote news or media. I mean, this is just a podcast. It's very casual. It's all fun and games, right? But the thing that Denzel Washington that said something in this interview that really stuck out to me, he goes, a lot of news facets or people who are in media, they don't like to, it's not about right information, it's about who could come out with the information first, right?
Right.
And I understand that game, like in social media game, in any of this type of stuff, like if you're not the first one there, then your information becomes dated, you won't get a lot of views, people won't care about your video, they won't click on it, and I understand that. But like something like with COVID, and the reason why I bring that up is because I'm besides talking about it here and there, I didn't want to do a full dedicated video to it because I really don't know anything about this, right? And not only do I not know about this, I think everybody who thinks that they do know stuff about this, they're not really talking to physicians, they're not talking to doctors, they're not talking about people who are in the hospital who's actually dealing with this stuff. So I was like, I might as well just bring you on here, doctor.
Might as well. No, man. I think there's a lot of, I think the benefit about living in this time is there's a lot of information that's shared. The downside of that is there's a lot of misinformation that gets shared. I mean, I know that even when this first started, like in the Black community, they're like, oh, in the melanin that we got protects us from, coronavirus.
Oh, for real? That was a thing?
In the very beginning, right? And then, and then it turns out that, the African American Black community is like one of the hardest hit with mortality, right? So then it's very dangerous, the amount of misinformation that happens. And then there's like lighter stuff where people think it's caused by 5G towers. I'm sure you're going to get stuff in here.
That shit.
Anyways, but there's a lot of misinformation, and I want to, I want to caveat anything I say in that I'm a family medicine doctor. I'm not an infectious disease specialist. I work both inpatient and outpatient. I'm in my last year of residency, so we do a fair number of ICU work and emergency department work. I have taken care of a few COVID patients, not a lot. I'm not in a New York emergency room. And I could share what we found. But again, if anybody's looking for any standardized guidelines, I would say like CDC, World Health Organization are still like those are the experts, like Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, the public health people.
Do you know what the reason why COVID affects like the African American community more severely than other ones? Like, what's the reason behind that?
Right. So the thought is because it's not as far as it's affecting them more as far as them catching it. It's more of them are dying from it. The belief right now is it's highlighting, as Dr. Fauci said, it's highlighting a discrepancy that already existed. So there's a lot more disparities in those communities. So your higher levels of like hypertension or high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, respiratory disease, asthma, those type of things that tend to be more prevalent in some of these communities. If you just think of it as your force field, so your force field's lowered because you already have these other things going on that affect your immune system.
Yeah, I was reading up a lot of stuff where I guess like when we're talking about numbers of people who are infected with COVID and the mortality rate of it, right. It's not as simple just to say they're dying because of COVID, right? It's like there's compound issues. It's not just COVID comes into their system, they were completely healthy, and then COVID was the killer. It's a compound thing. Though COVID is the thing that set them over the edge, that caused the death, you have to look at a litany of things of why COVID affected them in such a manner.
I think so. I think I hesitate to say yes, right? Yeah. I think the name of this virus is the novel coronavirus, right? If you look at its name, like the SARS virus that happened a few years back, this is basically it's the same name, like SARS-CoV-2, right? So it's like a similar virus, but it's also called the novel coronavirus. It's new, meaning that we are learning in real time a lot of the things that we're doing. Like, for the first 2 months, like the treatments that we were doing, we didn't know if they worked. There was and because our normal methods of treatment, right, is that there'll be these very like randomized controlled studies at these big institutions who will try out these medications. You'll see these numbers. Experts will weigh in and say, yes, this is what we think will be the risks and benefits have been evaluated, and we believe the benefit of this treatment far outweighs any risk, right? But because this is so new and it's spread so fast, any treatment, that we want to try, it's not studied yet. We have, like, if someone's in our ICU and someone's dying, you're gonna like, and you're talking to your friends who are in New York, Connecticut, somewhere else, who are seeing some things, and they're like, hey, I tried this on some of my patients, and we're getting, some beneficial responses. So you try it, but it's not necessarily as evidence-based as would like to be. So it's a very interesting place. So going back to your original question, the way that coronavirus kills, we don't 100% know. We do know that in some cases it can cause this very extreme, almost inflammatory damage to your lungs, similar to, So, and then we do know that it creates a lot of hypoxia or low oxygen, right? So we know that that's a way. There's some people who saw, in some patients, you start having higher degrees of what we call like hypercoagulability, or basically like your blood gets thicker and you get more, you get more clots to vital areas. And I think we see that. We see more kidney failure in some, like acute, like, so we call it acute kidney injury. So you see some of that. There's a number of different ways that the virus is presented, and hasn't been black and white and saying, yo, if someone gets this, they're going to go out like this. You don't know. Even today in the New York Times, they're talking about like, children are presenting with the interesting symptoms that, in conjunction with coronavirus that we haven't seen before. And they don't know. We don't know what that is. It could be nothing. It could be something. Before, the one thing that we knew is that, this didn't tend to affect healthy young children and adolescents as much as adults and people who have, comorbidities. But, every day something you could come out and doctors like, what is this? And we're like, I don't know. And you're compiling data. Like, I think there's going to be a big analysis of everything that went down in 2019, 20. And then if this goes on until next year, which looks like it might, it's going to be looking at all this stuff that we did and all these patterns and trying to get a better idea about, okay, we think that this constellation of symptoms or presentations is associated directly with the virus, or this was coincidental.
Yeah, because you know, the hard part for me is that when I read this stuff online, right, and you know, I have medical insurance for whenever I go to a hospital. I also have I also pay for primary care. Right, specialized like primary care. If I need something really quick, I just pay an extra. It's like an extra $150 a month, and for me that's important. I think like now that we're getting older, it's important for me. So like anytime I feel something wrong with myself, like I hit up the primary care doctor that's in the app.
Right.
And I'm like, hey, do I got corona? Yeah, because like I'm freaking the fuck out. Because when I read the list of the possible secondary side effects of what you can have for corona, it's like my everyday pain. You know, they're like, oh, if you have a slight cough or you have a headache or your bones hurt or you might have chills. I'm like, that's everything. Like, how do I not know, or how do I know if I have this or not? You know?
Yeah, it's hard, man. I think part of what makes this virus so, so insidious, I guess is the best word, or the spread, like this has made it go from like a localized thing that we, attribute to be starting in Wuhan to becoming a global pandemic, is that the presentation doesn't necessarily hit you with a very, very sick presentation for most people, right? Yeah. Like for the majority of people, it might be mistaken for a common respiratory virus, which, the common cold. It hit, like, if you think about it, hit like in, winter 2019, 2020. And so at the same time that you have cough, cold going on, you also have this disease brewing. So people who have, like you said, non-specific, we call it non-specific symptoms. That's kind of how we like to describe them. You have cough, cold, general malaise, like you're just feeling like icky. The dangerous thing is that you're what we call shedding the virus. So so they think like the peak time before, a viral shedding is up until you have all the manifestation of your symptoms. So we know fever is very common with it, and we know that a dry cough, and then
what exactly does a dry cough mean?
Okay, so that's an easy question. So some coughs, like have you ever had like a really bad cold or something when you're coughing and then some stuff comes out like green stuff? Yeah. So that's sputum. So that's what we call a wet cough. A dry cough is you're coughing, but you're not producing any sputum. So that's what a dry cough is just nothing's coming up. It's just you're coughing. But
you're consistently coughing though for no damn reason. Like
Well, I mean, it varies, right? That's the thing. So the main thing with coronavirus is that this thing is like a doppelganger. It could be so many different things. So it was going around spreading. So the only like great comparison I've heard people like give an analogy to is like Ebola. So Ebola, if you got Ebola, you are sick as, can I cuss on this thing?
Oh, you can cuss. You say whatever the fuck you want.
You are sick as shit. All right. Yeah. So, and then, so you're sick as shit. It's like, especially if you have like the hemorrhagic type, all these, all these things going on. And so people are able to look at you and be like, this person is sick. It's like, let's quarantine him off. Make sure that whoever's touching him, we're like watching for symptoms too, but we are going to like quarantine this person off, and we are just going to be like very vigilant about how we bury him, how we move him, who goes in and out, who touches him, who touches his waist, all that stuff. Right. But with this, if you got this, if like, say you got it and your case was what we call mild, right? Yeah. So you had some chills, you had like a little temperature, you had some cough, you're just not feeling great. Like normally, like you would probably go to your work still. You'd probably still try to do your podcast, try to do some things, still, sleep next to your fiance, all these things that, that you do as your activities of daily life, but you're spreading the virus and you don't even know it.
Oh,
you don't
shit.
know.
Yeah.
And that's what happened here. Like, so a lot of people I'm not going to say everybody, but most people we attributed, they probably had some mild symptoms and they're still spreading it. But what the blockbuster, I guess, realization and why we changed to this whole like universal masking thing, one of these joints, is that, CDC, World Health Organization came out and they're talking about like, there's probably a lot of asymptomatic spread. So people who get the virus, who don't necessarily present with symptoms, but they're still spreading the virus.
And that's what's happening a lot, I guess, because like, it's so interesting with the whole thing of like not being able to recognize that you have it. And is it like in a case of like sometimes when people have it, it's already kind of late? Because I just found out today actually that a really close friend of ours, his uncle just passed away from coronavirus, and his wife is a nurse and she couldn't tell. And so she left home and then she came back 3 hours later and he was dead in the house, which is kind of crazy. Like, she's a nurse, she's dealing with the whole COVID situation and she couldn't even see it in him. And now she has to see if she has COVID. Right.
I think it's right. Yeah. So I think you're right. There's a lot of the presentation that's very similar to like a common cold. Then there's people who don't present at all. And then you have the people who do have the typical symptoms, and it's like really high temperatures, the cough, everything, right? And say you're like, I think I have coronavirus. By the time you're at that maximum peak symptomology, you've probably already been shedding it around you and your loved ones, and your family members and your close contacts, right? So it's hard because by the time you realize I think I may have it, then you already have to start talking to people about I may have exposed my wife, my kids, certain people.
I guess like if I were to ask you, especially because like you work in a hospital, do you feel like people maybe even around you don't really understand the severity of the virus? Actually, let me ask you this first. What the fuck is a virus? let's go back into the basics, because I feel like we're throwing this word virus and, like bacterial infection around. I don't think the general public, such as myself, I don't know the difference between a virus and a bacterial infection, and why a virus is more severe than, something like the common cold. Like what's the difference?
Right. So basically, if you're looking at a virus and a bacteria, they're both causing. So it's a great question, because a lot of times you're causing probably a similar presentation in a patient, right? Which is they are sick. They might be sick enough that they get hospitalized. They might be sick enough that they can stay home a couple of days and get over it. Viruses and bacteria, basically, they have very different base structural. It's a structural thing. So if you look at it, you basically look at it. So with bacteria, we've identified like different families and kind of like how bacteria look. We like know their structure. We know like what makes up like certain walls and gram-negative, gram-positive, anaerobic bacteria. Basically, they are organic things that we have developed antibiotics for. Viruses, they're infectious agents, right? But they're not necessarily something that we have. There's a lot of stuff to get into the weeds, but it's basically we don't have medication for them beyond like vaccinations. So like, and basically our own immunity if someone is already exposed. Basically, these are infectious units that cause illness. After they cause illness, people create, essentially you gain immunity, most viruses. And then that immunity is kind of the basis of how we started coming up with vaccination, like smallpox and all that stuff. Basically, you see that, okay, if I introduce to you an activated form of something, like so influenza or the flu, if I kill this virus, like a protein, I kill it, and I give it to you, like some of its proteins, your body will still look at it and be like, hey, this is a foreign invader in my body. Let's process it, break it down, and create antibodies for it. So if we see it again in the future, then we can respond to it really quickly and it won't make us sick. So I think when you think about like viruses and you think about bacteria, think about like viruses are a lot smaller, bacteria are a lot bigger. Bacteria, there's like really like we've kind of categorized different families of bacteria. There are certain virus families as well, like the coronavirus, like SARS, MERS, COVID-19. These are all in the same type of coronavirus family, and it's mostly based on a protein structure.
Yeah.
The scary thing about viruses is that there's you almost call it like a rearrangement that they could do sometimes, remodeling and if they rearrange in a certain way, almost like a transformer, then they can become like our immunity that we had to it. Say you already saw the old version, will not work on the new version.
It's just like a new virus to them, and they don't know how to deal with it again.
Right. So that's what they a lot of what we so SARS, the MERS, COVID-19. There's a lot of talk about the theories around zoonotic viruses. So a lot of these viruses exist in nature already in animals. Like for example, COVID-19, people think likely it originated from bats. And the reason we think that is because there's a lot of coronaviruses in bats. And I think after the SARS epidemic, they sequenced a bunch of some of the viruses in some of these animals because we were scared of something jumping from an animal infecting us. And then once this outbreak happened, they sequenced COVID-19 and found it to have very high similarities with one strain of one of the bat viruses.
Oh.
So with these things, like a lot of times you have like a host animal that has a virus that only works in bats. And then, without getting too specific, a lot of times it will go into another animal, which we call like an intermediate host. So like in the case of MERS, it went to like camels, right? And then for this one, it's like for COVID, it's like that funny animals that I think it's like penguin. And I always forget its name, but it's like that little scary looking.
The pangolin.
Pangolin. Yeah. So that's the intermediate host where, so you had a recombination from when it was a bat virus only, it recombinated or changed, transformed, went into the intermediate host. And then like you have a small change in the sequence and then it could go into us. And then it just takes off like gangbusters. Sorry, it's not a super clear explanation, but like there's a lot behind like bacterial and viral infections.
Yeah, but in general, I guess like just for someone like me, just bacterial infections are easier to manage, and viral is just on a completely different level.
Right. So I think for us, for bacteria, both these infections could be very dangerous and could kill anybody, right? But since the advent of antibiotics, we have better techniques for treating bacterial infections. Like we have antivirals, like if you think of HIV, those are antivirals. So we had to basically, like the human immunodeficiency virus we had to find ways to try to stop this virus from replicating within our cells. So there are some like antiviral medications, but they tend to be a lot more expensive, a lot more specific, a lot more less common than say if I hit you with like a penicillin, right? It could get a whole bunch of stuff, and a whole bunch of things that can make you sick. And
so it's like if you have like a bacterial infection, it's like, well, take these antibiotics, it'll kill whatever that is. And there's just a litany of things that it could take down versus a viral medication. Like the thing for the flu, this is for the flu.
Right. Exactly. So it's very specific. Exactly. So you have to be, because the viruses, their structure is super unique to that virus. So you have to, that's why everyone's racing to figure out a vaccine for the SARS, because you have to first sequence and understand what this virus looks like, then understand how it spreads, then understand how it replicates in our body. And then in any of those stages, kind of figure out what's a place that we might be able to intervene and stop this thing from taking hold and making you really, really sick.
Because that's also the curious part too, because like if somebody explains to somebody in layman terms what a vaccine is, right? It's like it's a dead version of the virus that's going to infect you, and it gives your body a chance to develop antibodies to defend from it again, right? But then I go back and I say, well, how come they can't just find that dead version and throw it in our body real quick, So it's just a lot more complicated process than that, right?
Right. And you think about it, right? Because you want to, there's a lot of safety and efficacy, right? Because again, this is a very elementary explanation, but there's a lot of safety and efficacy that goes into making sure that we're not gonna be, the cure isn't worse than the disease in a sense, right? So it's like, okay. Right. I mean, like you want to be able to put something in someone's body that is going to help them get better, but then also will not make them worse, right? And there's so many different, types of people on this world as far as genetics go. So we want to make sure that these things are as safe as possible, and then they are tested broadly and they're effective in everybody. Because say it works in some people and say it doesn't work in other people, then you're like, why are we going to mass produce this thing if it's only going to be effective in a small percentage of the people or the populace? So you have to go through these, they call them phases, right? So there's, FDA basically for us in the States, phase 1, 2, 3 trials where we're doing efficacy, we're doing safety and all these different stages to make sure that what we're giving to people is going to be both effective and safe enough to give to yourself, your parents, your kids. There's a standard that we need. But that being said, there are, there are human trials that people, when people are very, very sick, if there are, experimental things like trials, people could sign up for those, right? And I know they have been having some trials, like in Washington State when this first started, and other places. Like I think Pfizer, has a human trial of a vaccine going on right now. So certain people will sign up and say, hey, you know what? I will be this trailblazer and take that and take that risk. And those people, God bless them, they are taking on this unknown, this X factor, in hopes that it may help cure, the infection that they have, and then they can recreate it for everybody else.
When I was asking you, I sent you a link the other day, and the person that I'm like I've been reading so much random articles about this stuff, and Khalif and I talk about it here and there, but he sent me a link about those 2 doctors out in Bakersfield, and they own like their own what's the word I'm looking for?
Urgent care.
They own their own urgent care, whether their own private practice or whatever. And they had this whole hour-long, not meeting, but it was a media thing, right? Where journalists came and they were grilling them pretty hard, and they were kind of advocating for, and I don't want to misquote them, and I'm obviously there's a lot more specifics if you watch the video, but it got taken down. But basically what they were saying was, from the stuff that they've seen, well, here's the first thing. They were talking, one of the journalists asked them about the findings of like Dr. Fauci and all these other people, and their argument to that was that Dr. Fauci and them and all these epidemiologists, there are people who aren't in the front lines. So a lot of the stuff that they're talking about is based on information without having to see actual people. And what they were saying as doctors, and they're only mentioning from their urgent care, from the numbers that they've seen And in comparison to what they've seen in terms of the mortality rate and kind of like how it's infecting people is not that much different from the flu. And that was their grounds for what they're saying, just from their information and the numbers that they've seen, right? From whatever numbers that they've extrapolated, right? And so I guess they were advocating for not a complete opening up of the country, but for there to be a thought of, okay, should we open up to the country with the numbers that are given every day? Because just like you said, these things that we are so cement on in terms of facts, it's based on the daily. It's like, this was a fact today. Tomorrow, another doctor from another hospital will be like, well, this is what we saw. Okay, well, these facts are changing, right? And I guess like from what he's saying from their numbers is that it's not looking any more different in terms of death rates and how it's spreading to be any more different than the flu. And so they're saying that there's a weird balance in this country where if we do shut down the whole, just all these businesses and how this country is going, well, we have to balance the negative effects that it's also having on the people besides just how the disease is affecting, or the virus is affecting us on just a biological scale, right? Saying there's like a raise, there's been a rise in domestic violence and all this other stuff from, shutting down the country and having people holed up in their house. And obviously people were really upset with what they were saying because there's people who have lost, family members for this. And we don't know people who have died. I don't know anybody who's died from the flu, but within this last month or two, I already know of people just an arm's length away from me who have passed away from COVID, right? So I guess like from what they were saying, and there was a lot of doctors that were, going against what they were saying, but in their argument, they were saying that from their friends who also own, that there are physicians in their state or city or whatever, they also agree with them. So how's like COVID affecting, I guess, like Sacramento, right? Because I don't know how it is in Sacramento.
Right. So there's a couple things there. I think trying to unpack and think about everyone's day to day like struggles, right? I don't want to minimize that there are a lot of people struggling with, wanting to make sure they have a job and providing food, all this stuff, a lot of uncertainty, especially when it comes to mortgages, rent, those type of things. And other pressures, right? Like interpersonal and all those things. I do, however, think that we have to be very oriented on the number of cases and the number of new cases specifically, right? So I think like a number of people have used pretty good analogies with this. I think Cuomo did a good job. Newsom, of course, here in our state. You have to essentially have enough testing in place that you can take samples and see how many new cases of the virus you're getting as you start to open up, right? So I think a lot of the question that governors are asking themselves, how many cases do we have a day? How many new cases do we have a day? What are certain sectors of our society that we could open up that would have a low risk, because everything is going to have a risk, right? Any interpersonal connection is going to have a risk of increasing the number of cases and the number of deaths, unfortunately, until we have a vaccine, or if this thing pitters out at some point. But in order for us to open up, I think we have to be patient, and we have to be aware that just because our local cases may not be at a certain level, doesn't shelter us from staying at those safe levels, right? So in Sacramento, for example, I think we have we've been at a very safe number. I think last time I checked, it was like maybe somewhere around 800, 900 cases. I was just on SacB this morning. Yeah. Anyways, just in the federal or national wide perspective, as far as cities goes, it's been very mild. And I think we've been very fortunate with some of the early stay at home orders and, all the hand hygiene and all the social distancing that people did a really good job as a state, right? Because the projections initially from our governor's office was about half the population was going to be infected, and that didn't happen. So now I think where a lot of the controversy lies is how do we open things up in the safest way possible, right? And you're pairing that with a lot of frustration from a lot of people who want to get back to their life, who have, who feel like they have been making sacrifices. And at this point, they're thinking that, it's worth it to get out there. But I think everything that's been done across our entire country has saved lives. In that we haven't had as many cases and people dying, but then we also in the sense that we don't overwhelm our hospitals, because at my hospital we have a 20-bed ICU, 20 beds, right?
Oh shit, that is not much.
Right, and then that's our hospital, and then there's the other local hospitals who have some a little bit more, some a little less, some without, right? And then so if you think about it, if we were at the stage that New York was, and we're or even LA, where we were having about 900,000 cases a day, and a fraction of those were sick enough to require ICU, and if that was happening on the daily, those resources would get overwhelmed very fast.
Yeah.
So I think we've done a good job as a collective, and now I think the frustrating thing is just kind of is trying to find a way to ease into things opening up, and the hard thing is you're asking people to be patient, and I think that there's a lot of people who are on their last straw.
Yeah.
And then you're seeing a lot of it on social media. You're seeing a lot of it everywhere on the news and at the protests. But
yeah, the protest thing is so interesting. I mean, I'm not one to talk. First of all, I'm not balling. You know what I mean? This whole government, intervention of us shutting down our businesses, and people also have to understand I'm a co-owner of 6 food businesses, especially in the hospitality business. This has definitely affected me,
right.
Affected our workers, affected all of our investors, everybody who's been involved in this, and it's been kind of rough, right? And I think I'm trying to wrap my head around why. Actually, I can't wrap my head around it, right? Just because I've seen some ridiculous videos. And, I don't want media to go ahead and warp everything that I'm thinking about. But when I see people kind of compare, being quarantined for a month and a half, right? And they're comparing it to fucking modern day slavery. They're saying it's modern day slavery. It's the most ridiculous statement I've ever heard in my life. I want to slap the Caucasian out of somebody, you know what I mean? I'm gonna slap the fucking shit out of you, right?
Yeah.
And it's gotten to that point. And this is what I'm saying. It's Dave Chappelle said it. People have fucking brittle spirits. A month and a half of staying at home and eating ice cream and watching TV has been really rough on you. And I'm not talking about people who had to shut their businesses down. I'm not talking about that, but there's people out there who are protesting because they can't go to the beach. That right there is a little odd to me. You know what I mean? If you're protesting because your livelihood is at stake, right? You haven't been able to pay your bills. These are the issues that are arising in your life. I understand. I sympathize with you a lot. Right? Because we both grew up really poor, and we know how much it sucks to worry about your day-to-day bills. I know that stress, I know that pressure. But when I see people protesting because I want to be able to go to the beach, that's when I want to give them the backhand of God. It's you know what I'm saying? It's yo, it's been a month and a half. Chill out. It's odd for me.
It's definitely one of those things that it makes me have to take a USA moment.
Yeah.
I do think that, I try to count some of the positive. I think people did a really good job in the beginning of this. I also think that, people couldn't, fear is a really interesting thing, right? It made people do some really messed up things, like some of the hoarding and some of the shopping practices that happened in the very beginning of this shelter in place, right? There were some very good acts, right, that happened at the same time. So, which restored my faith in some humanity. But then I think, it's been about early March, since a lot of these things went down.
Yeah.
I think people could only go so long, and then if they don't see, if it could be, it's hard because a virus is not something that you could see. So then when you look outside, it's the weather's looking good.
Yeah.
The weather is nice. If you live next to a beach, you're like, oh man, that looks very inviting. I think, unfortunately, you don't realize that things might still be very precarious until you go out there, and then unfortunately we start having numbers start to spike again. Yeah. So I think that's the biggest concern, is that if and my theory, right? A lot of these places are opening up now. I think for California, we're opening up stage 2 on Friday.
Yeah.
And then Georgia's open, other states are opening up. It's going to happen, right? So I think the question is, what happens if these cases start going up and we start having more mortality? Do we shut back down? Are people going to be able to recognize the threat? And I hope that they will.
Yeah, because
I hope it doesn't go that way, though. I hope everything's great. I want to be outside too. I want to travel too. I want to enjoy a beach as well. But it's unfortunate times.
I think the thing that I'm seeing a lot in differences in terms of people who live in this country versus other people, right? Like I'm as American fucking gets, right? Like right. I was born in Korea, but I came here when I was 2. Like if there was a war between, I don't know, like another, I'm gonna be on America's side, right? I'm an American. Like this is who I am. And right. From what I'm seeing, and just to put that out there, and the reason why I say that is just sometimes I talk about like the American spirit. Like we're so gung ho about this country, but I think the foundation of this country is also that we also want to have the option to fight tyranny in case our rights are taken away, and that starts to seep out as like the root of who we are in this country and what it is to be an American. And the moment somebody feels like it's being tampered with, people start to get a little fucking crazy. And when I talk about brittle spirit, and the reason why I'm mentioning this is because I'm comparing it to my other friends who live in other countries right now, and I'm asking them how it is. It's like, oh, we're chilling. Like it's been about 3 months for them, and they're like, yeah, it's tough, not being able to go outside. The weather's nice, but like we understand how serious this is, and so we're just gonna stay in. And our government, they have a belief that the government has their best interest in hand, right?
Right.
But then again, I also think like for example, like a friend of mine in Canada says that each person in their household is getting $2,000 a month until this whole thing's over, and and our stuff, the land of the free, we're getting that $1,200 bump once, and then it's like, good luck. So I understand both sides, but sometimes it's hard to, it's going to be hard for other countries to really empathize with what we're going on, because they have worse cases and worse scenarios, and they're not sitting there complaining about their situation. So
right, it's definitely I think it's an interesting time. I think it's definitely revealing a lot of things about different cultures, and and even some of the practices, right? I think we're very you and I, we're both huggers, right? We're all
for sure.
I think we're all very well aware of some of our interpersonal habits now.
Oh yeah, dude, like how much of an affectionate hugger I am. It's really there. I'm about to hug random strangers in the supermarket and shit. Like, you trying to get some of this? I'm trying to sell it like it's drugs and shit. It's like, yo, you trying to get some of this hug real quick? Like, meet me behind this alley, bro. And let me see what's up. And you know what I've realized too, that I have to be very, very mindful and conscious about. And a lot of people have been asking me to talk about this situation, specifically when it comes to a lot of hate that Asian Americans have been getting. And the reason why I haven't done a podcast on that yet, and I think I am going to start doing podcasts about it, and I'm gonna start calling it the whole segment is just gonna be called "Coughing While Asian," and then and the reason why is because I want to be very careful about what I say and how I feel about things, right? Because I don't want to come off as somebody who's just getting caught up in whatever the media says, and sometimes when I see the plight of somebody who looks like me and what they're going through, and I start putting myself in their place, I start getting fucking angry, right? And I have to be very careful with that voice sometimes, because I could get on the other side and just start mowing people down. Because, just for an example, I've been walking around. I walk around in this area called South Pasadena. South Pasadena's nice. You went jogging there. It's nice as fuck. Yeah. Super diverse. Everybody waves and says hi to you. It's just really dope. But ever since the COVID situation, I've had so far 3 instances where people treated me like shit, and that's never happened before.
Really,
I've never had that shit happen to me. Specifically in South Pasadena. Like, for example, I was at La Monarca. I think I took you there. It's the Mexican coffee shop, right? Really dope.
Right.
And I told you, and I might have told you this, but it was that lady who said "you people" to me, and she was like, "This shit is happening because of you people." Now, mind you, she might have said like people who are social distancing.
It's never a good idea to say the term. Just PSA for everybody listening. Never a good phrase. Just don't lead with your people.
Yeah, she's like, it's happening because of you people. And I heard that shit, and I was like, you know what? You might have meant people who aren't social distancing. However, I didn't take it like that, And, long story short with this, I'm not going to go. I'll tell the whole story in another podcast. But, the manager stepped in and she kind of kicked her out. And I had to sit there and I was like, yo, I've been living in this nice, like, Pasadena, super diverse area for the longest fucking time. Right? Been here for about 6 fucking years. Never had a single instance where somebody said "you people" at me or looked at me like I was an outsider. Never ever had that fucking experience before. Yeah. And this is what we're talking about when we talk about the rhetoric, specifically coming from the president of the United States, when he says a phrase like "China virus," right? Right. And people don't understand how powerful those words are, and how it gives a green light to other people who've already had these bigoted feelings towards a culture, right? And they've never really felt the strength or the power to say it, because it's been in their fucking mind for a long fucking time. But when the president gives you strength to say that, that's when you have an instance like me, where I've been in South Pasadena for 6 years, one of the most diverse, nicest places I've ever been, and somebody looks at me at the coffee shop that I go to on a daily basis and says, "It's because of you people." And I sat there, and at first I kind of laughed about it, which, as a comic, I wrote a whole sketch about it. But then afterwards, I'm like, "Hey, fuck this bitch!" You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm like, "Yo, fuck you!" And I was like, "Yo, I'll fucking slap the fucking shit out of you," right? And it kind of opened up this whole conversation, and especially for a lot of Asian Americans, for you to really think about this. And I talk about this too. My best friend, he's sitting across from me right now on this video conference. He's an African American male, right? I grew up in a very diverse area, Black community, Asian community, right? So I call it the Black American plight is not something that's foreign to me. Right? I've seen it with my own eyes. Like, I've seen disparity. I've seen this shit my whole life. So when people talk about Black American issues, I tend to feel a certain way about it because I grew up around this community, right? Like, we were around each other my whole life. And so sometimes I think the one positive thing that came out from this is that I know there are maybe a handful of Asian Americans that see this, and they saw when the whole Trayvon Martin thing came out, right?
Right.
And for other people too, like in my Asian American community, when you saw this Black Lives Matter movement, and I'm not saying that a lot of people that I know didn't believe in that shit, but there were a handful of it, right? But that moment I heard that "you people," even though I understood what that "you people" phrase was said when it was said to another culture, like the Black American culture, when it was said to me, I was like, it clicked even harder. It's like, how fucking dare you? What did I do? What did I do? And it kind of made me sit there. I was a little frustrated with it. I was like, oh, so this is what the Black American community is talking about right now. And you never really know. And then a few weeks after that, when I was walking, this old lady, she had her little fucking rake, and she was like, "I don't see you wearing a mask. Make sure that you stay away from me." And I was like, hold on a second. And so I was like, okay, I wasn't wearing my mask when I was walking, but I was clearly like 12 feet, 15 feet away from her, right? And I started walking by, and I saw this other white couple going by. They weren't wearing any mask. They were right next to her, and she goes, "Good morning." And I'm like, oh, okay. So this is fucking interesting. And I wanted to sit there, and I'm like, damn, this doesn't. And it got to a point where I saw it repetitively, right? So there was this other time where this guy was walking a little too close to me, and he was kind of like being an asshole about it. And I already cursed somebody out. I already cursed that lady out in the coffee shop. I already had it. And now I start to realize where sometimes all you can do is just roll your fucking eyes, and you get fed up with the shit. It's like, what am I supposed to do now? Am I going to sock everybody that comes my fucking way?
You get tired.
You get tired of this shit.
Yeah. It's hard, man. I think, it reminds me, what is it? The Martin Luther King quote, like, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. And it's, and you like to think that we're in the year 2020 and some of the, we're in California. It's one of the very progressive, blue states. But, we're also a state that imprisoned a large portion of our Japanese population, after Pearl Harbor, and you like to think that these knee-jerk reactions of stereotyping and hate won't happen, but no, they happen, and they've been happening here. They've been happening globally. What is the black people in China too were like getting turned away from McDonald's, and I was like that is wild. Anyways, it's and it's these things where you have to be right. Like, I don't know, like these things happen, but I think we have to like join together and stand up for each other and make sure that we all are dealing with a very like present threat. But it doesn't mean that we lose some of that camaraderie between groups and just being an ally. If it's not your group, if it's not your person, it's being like, hey, no, that's messed up. Like, yeah, and I have to not get caught up in that shit, because I also have to mention too, on these walks there are I could tell like some of these white people, they're like super sensitive to the situation. They look me in the eye and they're like, good morning. They want to make sure like, hey, you're safe with us. And I gotta say that even though I'm talking about 3 situations where that negative thing happened, there were still about 90 or 100 more situations where there was a white person that came up and they said good morning to me. They said hello. They smiled at me. Right. So I got to make sure. And the reason why I'm bringing back this whole thing of being careful about what I talk about when it comes to these situations, I can't let 3 fucking assholes represent the other 99% of the people that I met that day. Right. And that's the hard part. Right. I think that's the hard part for a lot of people. You see stuff in media. You have these bad instances with a specific culture, but you have to look at I look at the numbers. It's like, listen, if that's 3 people out of like whatever, 100 or 200 people that I saw in the last week, then who am I to go here and judge this whole group of people from these few individuals who made that mistake? Right. But it doesn't make me want to sock them in the fucking face. My God, I just wanted to I could just strangle you, bitch. Oh my God. Yeah, no, I've had some positive experiences with people. So I think I think even though like what you say is true, and there are people who are being horrible to each other and people who are hoarding toilet paper for no good reason. I don't know why.
Wash your ass.
There have been a lot more. I don't know. There's a lot more kindness, I think, in the streets, and I think that sometimes when something like this happens, you do have. People like, it's almost like they don't sweat the small stuff anymore. So it's like, hey, like this like familial beef that I had with you over whatever. Like, no, we're just worried about everybody being safe. We just want, mom and dad to be safe. We want our kids to be safe. Make sure we got enough food. Like, I'm not even beefing about that $20 you owe me. I mean, let me catch you in August. Yeah, $20.
When this pandemic's been over, it's gonna be back. But for now, just be safe. But you give me that 20 spot.
Yeah, like you gonna run me that 20. You know what I mean? Like it's like yeah, it's cute right now, but I don't need that 20 because that's when the stimulus check runs out.
Yo, a lot of people are, because I guess like it's just a stimulus check, and on top of that, there's the government assistance with the coronavirus.
Unemployment?
Yeah, with the unemployment together, and it's a good amount of money for a lot of people. Like I know a couple of my friends it's like an extra $600 a week.
That's good.
Yeah, it's $600 a week, not including your unemployment. So it's that compounded with that.
That's good. I hope that my concern is too, like when we come out of this, it will be a very big rebuild economically for everybody. So I hope there's still jobs. I hope people have employment because, I think there's going to be a point when we're like, all right, people got to get back to work. And I hope there's still jobs and people are able to, carry on with their lives. And we don't have a lot of the, there's a lot of, remember back when 2008, a lot of the mortgages and people getting kicked out of their homes and all that stuff. And that's my concern too.
Man, I've been, because I go through Instagram, I've been spending so much more time on my phone. It's disgusting. But like, I'm seeing all these Instagram stories, people like putting up these posts of like, listen, if you don't gain a new skill during this quarantine, it means that it's not the fact that you didn't have the opportunity. It's because you didn't have the mind state for it. I'm like, you shut the fuck up. All right. I'm going to eat ice cream. I'm going to eat some ice cream and I'm going to wallow for a little bit. You don't tell me shit. People trying to be motivational speakers now. I've seen a lot of people from Sacramento too. They over here just showing their new talents on their fucking Instagram. I fucking clown on these motherfuckers.
What kind of talents do they have?
Well, I'm talking about they doing Instagram lives and shit now. They're like, yo, I'm doing this. Hey guys, what's up? I'm doing an Instagram. Like, guys, it's like 3 people in this room, bitch. Turn that shit off. Like, what you talking about? Talking about guys. What do you mean guys, man? It's me and 30 other people that are your friends. Turn that shit off. Fucking ridiculous.
David, are you gonna start an OnlyFans?
Oh, I already did. Instagram be fucking Instagram be silencing me. Trying to silence me, son. That ain't happening.
Gonna be out there showing all your risque pictures.
Damn straight I will, dude. I mean, for you, just to kind of wrap this up, I guess like if you were to give some people on how to deal with the whole corona thing, and this is just somebody who's you're a general physician. I'm a family doctor, right?
Family medicine, yeah.
Yeah, family medicine and stuff. I mean, I guess like if you could tell people from your experience, like what would be the safe thing to do as of right now and how they should like practice like social distancing, like what could you tell people?
Right. I mean, I think most people, like, I want to give you the benefit of the doubt. Most people are pretty smart. I think it's, it's being very particular about when you go out, in what kind of groups you're gathering and what you're doing, right? So I think there's essential things like you have to get your groceries. If you're still working, right, you're an essential worker, you have to go to work. It's making sure that you have your face mask, you're washing your hands, you're trying to avoid, I know it's summertime, right, but like birthdays, parties, little things that I know are going to start happening again. I think you want to be cautious about doing that. And one of the most powerful things that I heard is you may be young, like you specifically watching this, you're probably a young, healthy person who doesn't have a lot of comorbidities, but your parents may not be, and your uncles or aunts or grandparents may not be, or you may have, a relative or a friend has a condition that you may not be all the way aware of. And what if you're one of those people who doesn't have symptoms and you spread something to them? That's a huge trauma and thing that could happen to somebody else, and then that'll be on you.
Yeah.
So I think it's and I don't want to be over here just scare attacking everybody, but it's just be cautious, be careful. And let's just like watch Florida and Georgia.
Let's watch them first, people. Let's see what happens to those motherfuckers. ATL popping, flow rider.
Let me try a little bit better to give you a better. I was thinking about the bacteria versus virus.
Hold on, the audio kind of backed out. What happened?
Can you hear me?
There it goes. Yeah.
Okay. Let me try better. Let's see if we could use this as a bacteria virus definitions. You could splice this. Bacteria, a little bit bigger, right? Viruses are a lot smaller. Bacteria are living organisms. Viruses tend to be small, non-living parasite things that can't replicate by themselves, and they need to hijack your own biological machinery to replicate. So bacteria, they are growing and they are, dividing and breeding, and you could have a huge bacterial infection, but they don't need to hijack your cells in order to multiply like a virus. So like HIV, coronavirus, all these viruses need to get inside you, get inside your cells, take over hijack your machinery. Like think of it like those bots in the Matrix. Mm-hmm. Like they're flying around, they implant in your stuff. They're crawling around. They get inside your machinery. They take over your whole system.
Yeah.
So that's how I like to think about it. And we have antibiotics, and we could stop bacteria because they are organic materials.
Yeah.
Organic things, biological things. So we could stop them. Viruses, we have to specifically find catered, think of it like a scalpel. We have to be very precise how we react to those things. Unless, we have to be very precise. So that's a big thing with viruses and bacteria. They both exist in a huge amount in nature. They're naturally occurring things. Viruses exist in all different species, from, in the case of coronavirus, in bats, and all over things. And then bacteria are all over the place too. In the soil, we have them in our bodies. There's good bacteria, there's bad bacteria, all that stuff. It's everywhere. Yeah. So that's kind of when people think about bacterial infections, viral infections, those are the big things. They tend to happen around the same time of year, and it's very hard to tell the difference between the two. If you are, if you don't get really, really, really sick. If you get really, really sick and you go to the hospital, there's tests that we could do to differentiate between the two. But at home, oftentimes it's hard for you to tell the difference.
Yeah. Well, guys, that wraps up this episode of the Genius Brain Podcast. This is Gabito. If he happens to be your family physician, just to let you know, you are in the worst hands
if someone comes in and they tell me like, "Oh, I saw you on GeniusBrain," I'm like, "All right, we'll be switching you to a different provider right now."
They're like, "I'm just here for entertainment, baby."
I was like, "Listen, I'm still not getting checks from that show."
So you be gone, people. All right,
hopefully this worked. I know the audio was going in and out a bit. You recorded some on your end. I recorded something on my end.
Yeah, you got yours on your end. I mean, either way, I think we got most of it. But I wanted people to talk to somebody who knows what the fuck they're talking about. Like I really ask questions like on some of the basic level stuff, because I know for a fact if I don't know, you motherfuckers don't know either, right? Like especially when it comes to like the difference between a bacterial infection, a viral, viruses and shit like that. This is like basic information that a lot of people just glaze over, and I'm guilty as well. Like before I go ahead and talk about this, I'm like, this virus is an issue, and then somebody goes, "What's a virus?" I'm like, "Listen, man. Get out of my house." That's all I got. I'm like, oh shit, I actually don't know what a virus is. I don't know how this spreads. I don't know how it affects my body. All I know is that it's bad.
It's there's a couple pieces of popular media that I think did a really good job. So I was telling you about it on our phone call earlier, but the Netflix limited series on the coronavirus pandemic. Yeah. It did a really good job with some of the background history, right? I think the TED Talk that Bill Gates has when he talks about preparing for I saw that.
You mentioned that, and Bill Gates was warning people like this, the next biggest issue is going to be something like COVID. And he was talking about it, and then boom, he goes, "We are not prepared for this. Our hospitals aren't prepared." Right. And this motherfucker was right.
Right. And, and the best thing about Bill Gates, he's not out here saying, "I told you so." He's just like, yeah, well, we're still in this fight. He's in that documentary on Netflix. I'm sure some of your followers have watched it. Yeah. Contagion, the movie. I think Matt Damon's in there.
Oh, I saw Contagion.
Yeah. They actually, I think they did it soon after the SARS pandemic. So a lot of the concepts they talked about as far as the, you have to take, take with a grain of salt. It's fiction, but, with some of the spread, the droplet spread and the fomites, and then they even talked about social distancing. And of course they had the drama, the riots that they showed were a little bit more extreme. It makes for better entertainment value, but a lot of that stuff, it's similar, right? So
it's very parallel, dude. I was like, oh shit.
Right. I was watching it and then I was like, this is pretty uncanny. Yeah. So I think there's things out there that, represent pretty good source of information. But again, at the end of the day, I would say, listen to your local public health I think in California, Governor Newsom is operating under the direction of his public health officials, and I think they're doing a great job. Governor Cuomo is doing a great job. Dr. Fauci is a superstar. So Dr. Birx, I think there's a lot of people who are putting out some good information, and just be a little skeptical if people start bringing up the 5G towers too soon.
Oh yeah! Shout out to Trump for suggesting that we just blast ourselves with UV rays and inject ourselves with
bleach.
With bleach. Yo, shout out. Yo, Trump, that shit was fucking gold, dude.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
That shit. When he said that, and he looked over, and well, it was his. What does she do? She's the fucking. She deals with public health. Yeah.
Birx, right.
Dr. Birx. And she was like, what the fuck? She had that look of like, what the fuck is this fool saying? He's like, yeah, I think we looked into blasting our skins with UV rays. You mean the shit that causes skin cancer? Great, let's do that. Please, let's do that, you jackass. I was like, oh my God, we live in a parallel universe. This is so, when he said that shit, I was like, is this a joke? Is he for real?
Yeah, it's, I can't defend. Also, I've been touching my face a lot, but I sanitize, and nobody touching my stuff, so. I don't want to be over here. People getting on me like they get on Fauci, but yeah, no. I think that's it. Wash your hands often. Social distance. Look, it's right now as we film this. It's the beginning of May. I think things are going to start opening up by June, and I just say take it slow. Take it slow. Don't dive right in. Don't go buck wild. Give it a little time. And then just kind of pay attention to the news and kind of see what updates people are putting out, about safe practices. But I think, overall, I want to say good job to everybody, because you have been at home for the most part, and you've been fighting with your partner.
I know what's up with that. Goddamn.
And you've been doing all, you've been doing all those sacrifices. And we in the healthcare community, we really appreciate you, just because it's been keeping our hospital numbers very manageable. So we're not overwhelmed. So I think for us, we want to say thank you. Everyone's been saying thank you to us, thank you to you, and of course all the people in our hospital that you guys don't always see that keep it running. Everyone's been, has stepped up.
Well, that's Gabito, and we will see you guys next time. Remember, Genius Brain uploads every Thursdays and Sundays, and other stuff than that. I'm here to keep you guys company on your commute. I know this podcast was a little different, but I wanted to address this because people have been asking. So, peace out, bitches. Love you.